joined now by Chief Erik Litzenberg, of course the chair of the IAFC Wildland Fire Policy Committee. A big title, but it's very pertinent and important right now with what's going on. You know, you turn on any news station and you see the great wildfires out on the West Coast right now. And because of all the fire activity in the U.S., talk to me about some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing because of those fires.
Yeah, you framed that well. If you're watching the news right now, you are bound to see some sort of wildland fire issue. Specifically right now, what's going on in California. That's what you're likely to see. And the truth is, we used to refer to a fire season. That was the common terminology. And we're really looking at a year of fire now that rotates around the country. Of course, it starts in the Southwest, and I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we saw it early in New Mexico and Arizona. And now we're seeing it in Northern California, the Pacific Northwest, and later on in the year we'll certainly see fires occurring in Florida. It's become a year-round issue in the United States. The biggest challenge that we see is really resources, because if you're looking at a year of fighting fire, a year of wildland fire, and then these large-scale fires that are pulling on local resources, at some point you hit an exhaustion period. Where you're starting to wonder, can our people hold up and can we find more people? And probably the biggest challenge we're starting to see is how do we keep up with the demands of this evolving fire season and the evolving fire year. Certainly you look at the Carr Fire, the Mendocino Fire, which has become the biggest in California history. That takes a lot of people, takes a lot of resources, and that's a challenge for us as local fire chiefs and local government to keep meeting the demand.
Of course, and it just seems like it lasts longer and longer, and there's more and more. With all of this going on, all the wildfires that we see throughout our nation, I want to talk more about resources and mutual aid challenges and what you think the role of local fire chiefs can be as a part of the solution.
Yeah, the local fire chief is absolutely part of the solution to this increasing demand for resources. So every local fire chief should be looking at their own department and figuring out what kind of people do I have, what capacity do I have, how do I train them, how do I qualify them, what kind of equipment do I have, what can I put in the system that's going to help meet this emerging need for resources. And the local fire chief is front and center of that. The International Association of Fire Chiefs has been working on what we call NMAS, or the National Mutual Aid System, that takes those resources and makes them available. It's essentially a way that these resources are shared nationally and locally. But without a local fire chief figuring out what resources they have and putting them into the system, it's hard to get something out the back end. The other part of that is the local fire chief should be trying to figure out, how can I better prepare my community? How can I do risk reduction? How can we do mitigation? How can I educate our local government officials, our local members? I mean, there are a lot of ways that a local fire chief can be part of this solution, and it's actually a pretty exciting time to be a fire chief in that aspect.
Oh, for sure, and a lot on everyone's shoulders as well. I want to get to this. The National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy is a mouthful there.
It is a mouthful.
It's a major driver in how everyone works together, and I want to talk about those partnerships helping face these challenges and what those logistical challenges are.
Yeah, the mouthful that you just said is usually broken down into what we call a cohesive strategy. That's the short term for it. Makes it a lot easier. The cohesive strategy is about a decade old now, and we're just now really gaining steam with what the cohesive strategy means. It really focuses on three tenets, and one is landscape scale management, one is fire adapted communities, and the third is collaborative response. So looking at landscape scale management, the theory is if all the partners are doing their part to manage the risk, to reduce fuels where they need to be reduced, and to mitigate the risks in total, then you're really helping a community face its challenges. The second part, which is building a fire adapted community, it has a whole lot of components. Education, probably the best thing is really allowing ourselves as fire responders and community members to learn how to live with fire. And then the last part is collaborative response. Of course, that's collaborative. That is all members working together to address fires like the fires that are going on in California, the fires we referred to earlier that are going on year-round now.
Yeah.
If we're collaboratively responding, if all of us respond as a team, we're much more effective as a force.
Oh, very true. And you kind of lead into my next question that I have for you, and that's for people who live in these communities that are prone to fire. It seems like everywhere, but
Yeah.
we see it in the media right now. But how can those people take some action to be more adapted to the possibility of fire?
Yeah, the term adaptable is huge. The fire adapted community is a term that's becoming more commonplace, and I think people need to understand fire is a natural part of our world.
Yeah.
It needs to happen, and we as community members, we as people who are starting to really like more and more living in the country or in what we call the wildland urban interface, part of being in a fire adapted community is understanding that fire is natural. The more we can educate ourselves and our community members and our elected officials on what that means, the better off we'll be. But there are other components too. Reducing risk, doing community-wide and sometimes parcel by parcel assessments on where does risk exist and how do we reduce that. That's an important thing for local responders to do. Educating our public, educating our government officials on things like building codes, on how to make your home safer, on how to make your property safer and more fire adaptable. Those are all responsibilities of local government. And of course, we talked about collaborative response, so making sure that your department, your community are ready to respond when things like the Carr fire, the Mendocino fire happen. It's important, and all of those are roles that local government and local fire chief can play.
And rolled up into one, the final thing I wanted to address with you is the safety of the firefighter. They face so many different situations every single day, and I know it's an important focus of this organization, the IAFC. What's being done in this arena, in the wildland arena, to address the safety of the firefighter?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to end on this because I think it's really important to understand that in everything we do, whether as a local fire chief, as a local responder, or the International Association of Fire Chiefs, firefighter safety has got to be our number one priority and the thing that we're thinking about from beginning to end. Firefighter safety is something that really has been gaining steam nationally, whether you're looking at structural firefighters or EMS responders, and it's just now also being tossed into the mix that the wildland and wildland urban interface are part of that as well. There are a lot of ways that we're addressing firefighter safety in this wildland urban interface and in the wildland arena. It's important to note that a lot of the same stressors exist. There are long, hard periods of work, often sleep and rest ratios or work and rest ratios are not what they should be. People are working many days in a row. There's a lot of emotional trauma. Sometimes you see human suffering.
For sure.
And really the exposures, the contaminants that are in smoke and the air are perhaps even more significant in the wildland arena because we don't have the same barriers and the same protective mechanisms that you can have in place in other ways. The best way we're approaching it is by science, by figuring out better ways to assess and evaluate our firefighters, whether it's before or during a fire, ways of doing air monitoring and situational awareness techniques that allow us to see what is actually happening around us, and then ultimately just treating ourselves better, whether it's going to ongoing physical evaluations, seeing physicians more frequently, in ways that incident management teams are reporting incidents and getting follow-up. There are a lot of ways that we're addressing firefighter safety, and I think as long as we all keep it in mind that has to be our number one priority and educate our communities that has to be our number one priority, I think we'll be better in the future and we'll help ourselves manage this evolving and increasing demand on our people and our resources in general.
You've got a lot on your hands, that's for sure, but
Certainly.
It's of course number one priority when it comes to the lives of our first responders. Chief Erik Litzenberg, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.